Good morning, darlings. So this is the second lesson of Romeo and Juliet. And before we moved on, just wanted to go through the prologue in a little bit more detail for you. Because essentially what this is a summary of the play. It's almost like when you go to the cinema and before your film starts, you see the trailers for the upcoming films, a way to entice you into going to the cinema again and spending a lot more money on popcorn than is humanly necessary. So this is a summary of what's coming up. So we'll start at the beginning, and I'm going to type in, because my new equipment with a fancy stylus and mouse pad for me to be able to write on this hasn't arrived yet. So we'll start at the beginning. So two households, both alike in dignity. Now, dignity here doesn't mean necessarily what we might think it means. It might mean, in fact, status. And what do we mean by status? This is an interesting word to consider. What do we mean by status? Well, we might mean rank, social class. We might mean entitled, and I don't mean entitled as in the spoiled way that we think now. We might mean that they have titles. Two households, both alike in dignity. So we're talking about people who are really high up the social ladder. We're talking about Lord Montague and Lord Capulet and their households. And because they have the same title, they are alike in dignity, they are alike in status. This is going to come into play, no pun intended, later on when we see Juliet being essentially married off to a count, the County Paris. Counts back then, and I'm fairly certain they are still now, were higher in status than a lord. So we need to consider why that is happening, but that is going to be for later on. So we're presented with, Shakespeare presents us with these two households, both liking dignity. Now, households there means not just the house they live in. It means a lot more than that. It means the members of the household, it means the staff, it means the wealth, it means the land. So generally, it means essentially the estate. It's what we call the estate. So this is everything. This is all the staff that they employ, so the nurse, the servants. This is all the wealth that they have, anyone they claim taxes from, anyone they collect taxes from, anyone who rents a property from them or somewhere to live, all the land that they own for, I don't know, farming or for growing or for whatever else, or for just owning land. And all of that comes under the umbrella of the household, the estate. This again will come into play when Juliet gets married later, because the laws of inheritance were much different back then than they are now. This is something for you to consider. And then we've got in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. Now, even if you were rubbish at geography at school, even if you didn't go to school, not you guys, the people watching the play, you lot go to school, or at least you should have 100% attendance. Even if they did not know where Verona was, the name itself, ending with an A, is quite Italian. You can hear this. I'm not going to do it, otherwise you'll all laugh at me. But you can hear this in your head. An Italian person quite easily saying this name. In fair Verona, where we lay our scene. Now, fair meaning nice there. Nice. It's a nice place. So this is important for a couple of reasons. One, this is a lovely town. It's a nice place to be. It's got good weather. It's lovely. You'd go there on a holiday, perhaps. And so the second reason that this is important is because when we get into the next couple of lines, we see that actually this town isn't as nice as it should be because of the actions of these people. What's happening here is they are also almost ruining the town. And we'll see that in the prince's speech at the end of the first scene. So in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. The word fair there can also mean that the person who runs it, the prince, is fair. What does that mean? Well, the prince had several duties. He was in charge. He was responsible for all the taxes and how the laws, and he was also in charge of putting into place any sanctions for people who broke those laws. And you guys will know, because you're in school and so you have to deal with people who are in charge, that the best sorts of rulers, or in your case teachers, are firm but fair. They have the rules, you know that you need to abide by them, but equally they don't take the mickey with those rules. They don't say that you need to hop along the corridors from one lesson to another and anybody who doesn't is going to get a detention. The rules are fair. Wear your uniform, come equipped to school with a pen, pencil, rubber, ruler, red pen, basic maths equipment, reading book and highlighters. Treat everybody with respect. Everybody's got the right to learn. Teachers have the right to teach. Everybody's got the right to feel safe and secure and valued. These are fair rules and everybody implements them, and we're all fair. So the prince here has got his rules for his city and he's fair about them. And we'll see that later on in the play when it comes to Romeo being banished, but we won't get there yet. So we've got fair Verona, meaning nice, meaning that it's got a decent amount of rules, but it's a fair sort of rule. It's not a dictatorship. And we've got this lovely setting of Verona. Now, Verona meaning Italy. Now, what do we know about Italy and its climate, for example? What do we know? Verona, then, is in Italy, and Italy is a very warm country. So what do we think about this? What do we think about when we think about warmth and heat? We think that people get agitated, that people become short-tempered, that people become aggressive, especially if you are, as Romeo and his friends are, young lads, young men, who have not a lot else to do. Romeo doesn't have much to do because he's the son of Lord Montague. He doesn't have much to do in the way of running the estate yet. He doesn't have school to go to. He's over the age. He's educated. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't need one. He's the son of a lord. So what is he going to do with his time? He's going to roam the streets and wander around. And when you've got a group of young men, and this is not stereotypical, I'm sure this happens with young ladies as well, but young ladies weren't allowed to roam the streets back in the Verona in these days, you are going to come across some tensions, particularly if there have been a feud going on, which we'll come to on the next line. So when we are thinking about why Shakespeare set his play in Verona instead of, say, Stevenage or Bristol, we are thinking we need that automatic idea of hot climate, and we need the automatic thing of it. Italians are quite passionate people. They're quite, and this is broadly stereotypical, yes, but it is also quite true, actually. And they're not always passionate in a good way. In here, in this play, we see that their passion can turn to rage on the spin of a 10-pence piece, or whatever coin they had back in those days. They're quite passionate people, and they're passionate about their cause, and they're passionate about what they think. And because this ancient grudge on the next line down, let me change colour, this ancient grudge on the next line down has been so ingrained into them, they've been brought up, both sides, Tybalt and Romeo and Benvolio, they've been brought up to hate the other side. Then, of course, they're going to see this as absolutely acceptable. They're not going to know any different. And they're going to absolutely try and champion their cause, their side, with their passionate natures. So, from the idea of Verona and ancient grudge, Shakespeare marries these two ideas together. So, ancient grudge then, meaning an old argument, a grudge meaning an argument or having something against somebody. And We don't know as the audience why this occurred. We don't know what made the grudge happen in the first place. We don't know if they were ever friends. We don't know if they had an argument. We don't know if somebody stole somebody's land. We don't know if somebody stole somebody's sheep. We don't know if somebody stole somebody's girlfriend or whatever. We don't know. And I think here the point is that Shakespeare says that perhaps we don't need to know because the characters don't know. We don't need to know because we're dealing with the here and now, and the characters don't know because it's been going on for so long. It's just ingrained into them. They hate the Montagues or they hate the Capulets, and the others, they're not to be liked, socialised with, conversed with. They're not to be treated with any sort of respect. And this is why we've got this new mutiny. Now, if you think about what mutiny means, it means a disruption against authority. Let me just type authority in. This will be so much easier when I've got my pens, I promise, guys. So authority, usually on a ship, you mutiny against the captain, the dude in charge. However, here, mutiny here is against these fair rules. This fair prince that's ruling the city. So here we've got this ancient grudge, new mutiny, which means that we've got this new fighting, this new conflict, this new disagreement. Something has refreshed this ancient grudge. It's brought it to the forefront for us, the audience, and for them, the characters. Now, on the next line, we've got where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. Now, there are two things here that we really need to pay attention to. The word civil has two different meanings here. Civil, meaning nice to one another, conducts oneself with, civility and politeness and a certain sense of dignity that we saw on the first line. But civil also there leans to the idea that these are people who are high up in status, that they should know better, that their civil blood, for example, they were very, what's the word I'm looking for? Not obsessed, but they were very aware of their bloodlines. They were very ambitious to make sure that their bloodlines and their offspring came from decent, what they used to call stock. And any of you who are farmers know about this. You want good, healthy, strong parents for your sheep or your cows or whatever it is that you're breeding. And here they wanted good quality young men for their daughters and good quality women for their sons. And when they mean good quality, they mean status, they mean a title, they mean money, they mean good manners and very well educated men. And they mean they've got a young lady who is capable of producing a good sized family, preferably with a son first, of course, and with a father who's got land and wealth. And again, we come back to this issue of why it's so important to marry well. Because for Juliet, of course, she was a woman, she was a girl, she couldn't inherit a title and she couldn't inherit land or wealth. So she needed to marry well, not only for her own security, but that so her, essentially, what should have been her inheritance if she'd been a boy, would then be passed on to somebody worthwhile, who wouldn't just be using her for her land, but she could attract somebody decent with what she had to offer, because her husband would then inherit everything that she should have done if she were a boy. So here we've got the idea of civil, meaning polite and pleasant, and conduct oneself with dignity and, decent manners. And then the idea of civil blood, meaning, high status, etc., what we've just discussed. So civil blood makes civil hands unclean, meaning that these people, the ones who are higher up, are doing the fighting. Now, if you hear a noise in a minute, it's going to be my dog. Please ignore him. So we've got this idea then, and you can make some notes on your copies that you should have downloaded for yourself. You should have saved a copy, or you can make notes in your red books about this. That's absolutely fine. So Then we've got a full stop and we're on to a new sentence. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes. So, loins there is not a misspelling. It's not supposed to spell lions. Please make sure that when you are spelling this, because I see this quite a lot in essays, not going to lie. I see quite a lot of fatal lions. Well, yeah, lions are mostly fatal. They've got very sharp teeth, but that's not what we're talking about here. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes. We've got foes meaning enemies there. And fatal loins meaning they produce children who are going to die. So this is Shakespeare giving us a warning almost of don't get too attached to these characters. They're going to die. But we can't help it. We are attached. We do get invested, and that's part of his genius. A pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. Now I want to talk to you about the word take here. The word take, we take our tail from here, is one meaning, but the other meaning is that they commit suicide. So we've got two references here to death. We've got fatal and we've got take. Okay, so Shakespeare is saying to us, so fatal and take their life. We've got two almost warnings here. Shakespeare is saying this is not going to be a happy play. Don't get your hopes up. This is a tragedy. This is a tragedy. A pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. Now, I want you to think about what star-crossed means. For me, it means fate, destiny. They are destined almost to be together. And the idea, I'm going to try and draw around this. See, you can't do this with a mouse. You just can't. Okay, so, sorry about the bad lines, guys. This will get better when my equipment comes, I promise. So a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. This here is really significant. We're thinking Italy, we're thinking the 1500s. We know that these people are Catholic. We'll get into this later, probably in year 10 where we do this in detail. But for Catholics to take their lives is a huge sin. You have to die in what's called a state of grace, meaning you have to confess your sins before you go to your deathbed. And this is why it's important to go to confession regularly if you're a Catholic, because you never know what's going to happen, especially back in those days where disease was rife. I mean, you were talking about the plague and stuff like that. There was a lot going on back then. So to go to confession regularly was not only something you had a duty to do as a Catholic, but it was a just in case as well. And taking your own life is a huge sin because Catholics value the sanctity of life. This is why they're still against abortion, because they view life as sacred from the minute of conception to the natural death of a person. It is sacred. Life is sacred and should be treated with the utmost respect. And here we know then that something significant has had to happen for these Catholic people, these star-crossed lovers, to take their life. We know that something is dramatic, something really intense is going to happen. Shakespeare is warning us. And of course back then, and if you know your history, and you should know your history, of course back then this was even more present in the minds of the people who were watching the play, both the people who were standing at the front, who used to sign their name with an X because they were uneducated, and the people around the outside as well, because we'd gone through such a tumultuous time in history. We'd had Henry VIII, who had started as a Catholic. He was Catholic when he was born. He was Catholic when he first got married. But because his first wife didn't give him a son, and he wanted another one as she was getting on a bit, he wanted another wife because he desperately needed a son to inherit his throne, his title, and all the rest of it. He desperately needed a son. He asked the Pope for a divorce. I'm like skimming over the history here, but you can research this in your own time. In fact, please do, because it's really quite interesting. And the Pope, of course, marriage being for life if you're Catholic, said, I don't think so. No, deal with it. And Henry went, nah, okay, no, I don't think so. I'll start my own church. I'm king. I can do what I want. And then he started the Church of England based on Protestantism. And so we'd swapped. Everybody went from Catholic to Protestant because Henry made them. And then when his son, who was really very young when he inherited the throne, his son carried on his father's way. And then when he died, because he died really young with no heirs, his elder sister, Mary, who was a very dedicated Catholic, married to Philip of Spain, who was also a very, very Catholic man, she changed everybody back to Catholicism. And then when she died, childless, Elizabeth I came to the throne. And she changed everybody back to being a Protestant because she'd been born as a Protestant. She didn't punish people in the same way that previous kings and queens had her sister and her father for being Catholic. However, the nation's religion changed again. So the audience here would understand, despite whether they may be Protestant or not, they would understand that Catholics view life as the most sacred and the most protected. Okay? So this means that it's really significant. And yes, it's in the middle of the prologue. And the actual event doesn't happen until the end of the play. However, we know it's important. We know it's important. Whose misadventured piteous overthrows do with their death bury their parents' strife. So this is talking about the aftermath of the play that we don't necessarily see the inner workings of. We get a little hint of it, but we don't necessarily see the inner workings of and the long-lasting effect of these two kids' death. The fearful passage of their death-marked love and the continuance of their parents' rage, which, but their children's end, naught could remove, is now the 2 hours traffic of our stage. So Shakespeare here is saying that sometimes sacrificing your characters for a greater good is worth it. Not necessarily people, but as a writer, you can kill off a character or two if the message is going to be that, well, perhaps it would be better if you didn't let things get to this state. Don't argue with people, and so you won't have to lose your children. Maybe that's the message he's sending. And then he says, it's now the 2 hours traffic of our stage. So you're going to be here for a couple of hours and you're going to watch this play. And this is what's going to happen. The only thing that could cure this rage between these families, this conflict, this argument, this grudge, this fighting, and I'm sorry if you hear a noise outside, but apparently they're doing some roadworks. The only thing that's going to end all this, and for you to see how ridiculous it is to fight amongst yourselves like you are and not be friends and not make peace, is the fact that your eldest children, your only children, are going to die. So this is a message that we'll get into when we study the end of the play, but this is a message for the audience, especially those who are sitting around the outside. Those people, and if you don't know about this, so people who couldn't afford brilliant seats, usually the people who didn't go to school, who weren't well educated, who were in low paying jobs, if they had any at all, they would have stood in front of the stage. And people pay quite a lot of money to stand in front of the stage now. It's a bit reversed, but it's a great experience. If you haven't done it, you should try. And then the people around the outside got to pay for their seats. They paid a higher price. They also got to pay for things like cushions to sit on and stuff like that. And they were the people who were educated. They were the people who were the landowners. They were the people who collected the taxes. They were the people who made the laws and contributed to society. They were the people who may have caused disruption. So Shakespeare is sending a message to those people when he says this, but we'll look into that later. So, and in the last two lines, we've got, the which with you, if patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend. So if you listen carefully, what we don't mention here, we will include in our toil, in our work, in our performance, and you'll find lots more. Basically, this is Shakespeare saying, actually, that's not just what this play is about. There's plenty more to be seen. So pay attention and you'll find that there's loads more for you to get out of this play, which is brilliant. which is exactly what we'll do. So go ahead and make some notes about what I said. Obviously, you'll need more than just these few words that I've given to you. You'll need some good detailed notes because this will help your revision. And then we'll move on to the next lesson next time. If you have any issues or you didn't understand what I said or you want something more clarifying, or you want something clarifying more, please give me a tweet at Miss Hine English, or you can email me. You will have my email address. If there are any issues, just give me a shout. I miss you all. I hope you're staying indoors. I hope you're washing your hands with soap. And I hope that you are staying safe. And I'll see you soon. You take care.